Wow. I'm not quite sure how I feel about everything that I just heard. It was a lot to digest. And I really do feel like this was a release for Bethenny. I think she needed it. This was a tribute in itself to her mom. She bared it all. And Bethenny is a little problematic, but who isn't? You and I can be a little problematic. We're all humans. Some things, let me preface this, some things are inexcusable, so don't get me wrong, but Bethenny has her quirks and everything. She's even talked shit about Meghan Markle, with whom, I think I'm on the more positive side of Meghan here on this channel. So I feel like hearing Bethenny speak about her mother in this tribute that she did, she released the video yesterday, and her mother passed, I guess that was Friday, and she put this post up. I had never seen Bethenny's mother ever. This is the first time I've ever seen her, and they look very alike. It was so interesting to see, and reading her whole post, like I could hear her saying it in her voice. So this video was a lot, and it really has you understand Bethenny as a person, as a housewife. Oh my goodness, going through all of that, oh my goodness, it just really opened my eyes, and you really get how Bethenny, the character that we see, and how she has her quick wit and biting humor and her one-liners that we eat up. It comes from her mother, but she's been able to kind of, I hope, obviously, I don't know about her relationship with her daughter. I assume that it's a great relationship, as it looks like. But she seems to have broken that cycle, but still has some of the ways of her mother. And hearing about her was just so interesting. So if you get some time, I would definitely suggest going over and listening to Bethenny's video. Just forewarning, she talks very fast. You have to keep up, but she's always talked very fast, but it sounds like it's like almost word vomit, and she's trying to get it out. And it's probably a massive release for her to get it all out and tell these stories and really put on display her childhood. She's like gone back in her childhood and is trying to work it all out. And I think it's admirable, because she's gone through quite a lot. She spoke about her mother and the dynamic between her father and her stepfather, because they were both kind of in the picture but not in the picture. What was important to her mom was money, and she had an eating disorder, which she shared on the show as well. And she was very vain. She was vanity was huge with her mom, and I'm sure that's in connection with the eating disorder as well. And she talked about how her mom would have a caddy of laxatives. It's a lot to digest. I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, Bethenny, that was super vulnerable. And I do want to say, by tribute, I know she's giving like all the dirty details and really being raw about her upbringing and her childhood that we didn't really hear before. We knew that it was bad. We knew there was abuse. We knew her and her mother were strained, but we didn't know the details that we do now. And it's a tribute because it's real. This was a person who lived a life, who struggled, but she lived, and that should be honored. And she does praise her mother, and at times I feel like she talks about her in an admiring way, although she says that their relationship is complex and this, that, and other was strained, and they may not have talked the most. She does talk about her mother in a way where there is some reverence there and a respect there somewhere. I don't know if she realizes it, and she's speaking out of love, I feel, when I was hearing her talk about it. And it came more from a place of her hurting for her mother and wanting her mom to have maybe potentially lived another life. And I think she was grieving the life that she felt her mother could have had if she didn't, have the dealings and problems with addiction and or the eating disorder or the men from the racetrack, which I didn't know was a thing. Like, I didn't know men from racetracks were trouble. She just clued me in on something. Bethenny's mom said, never get involved with a racetrack guy. Okay, so just a little tidbit. I've never experienced that. I think I've been to one, I think I went to, what was it, Preakness or something? I went to one of those horse races where they bet and stuff. It was a fun time. You get to drink, get up all fancy and whatnot. But that is a great clue. But I do feel like this was very eye-opening. Like, her talking about their trip, it seemed like they did, she's named multiple places like Greece, Rome, Paris. It seemed like they may have did a European Mediterranean trip, her and her mother. And she was just so surprised and in awe of how worldly, cultured, and knowledgeable her mother was. She knew about languages and fashion and history and this, that, and other. And all the men were captivated by her. And she was just so surprised and shocked because she hadn't seen her in that way before. But then, that was the first time she saw her mother, make herself throw up. Which, hinting at her lifelong struggle with an eating disorder, which Bethenny said, to her death, she never admitted. So that was the first time, seeing her mother in a way that is oh my gosh, she's so awesome, she's so beautiful, she's so stunning and elegant, I want to be like her. And then in the same moment, you seeing her throw up, and she's don't tell anybody because your dad's gonna get mad, da 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 da. So you're harboring this secret, and I'm just oh my gosh, Bethenny really went through it, and you really never know what people go through. You just don't. So Bethenny's a very layered person, and I can admit at times she was seeming to be a little bit too much, but I've always loved Bethenny as a housewife. I was excited to hear her open up like this. I was excited to hear about the divorce news and information she was giving. It's just my goodness. So obviously she's giving Bryn a very different life than what she received growing up, and I guess that's what it's all about in this life, trying to do better than what you had, or trying to make better decisions. And because you have more, your parents have afforded you more, so you can do better, and kind of honor them in a way as well, and break those generational cycles that we all have in our family dynamics. I mean, along with her mother having the eating disorder, she was, like I said prior, an alcoholic. She struggled with that, and she was a smoker. Bethenny said she was a French type of alcoholic, where she would just be drinking all the time. I guess you would just have a glass in your hand, and I guess progressively through the day you would just get drunker, and she would wake up and there'd be bottles in the sink and whatnot. And but what was really interesting to me was she said her mother was very jealous of her. She wanted to be her. She would say she wants to switch spots with her. She wished she could be her. And it's so crazy because Bethenny, on the flip side, saw her mother as being so stunning and elegant and beautiful and all of these things, and admiring her, and then yet her mother was wanting to be her daughter. And I have heard about that dynamic before, where a mother is trying to live through their child, or jealous that maybe they didn't get to do the things that their child did, so it builds up some type of resentment. Although you would think as a parent you would be happy that your child has gone on and has done better. That's a testament to how you brought them up, and that's your child, so you would think that proudness would be there more so than jealousy or resentment. But feelings are complex. I completely understand. Nothing is black and white. But I just think that seeing Bethenny this vulnerable, I mean, she is laying it all out. She's crying. She's barefaced, very relaxed in this interview. It's raw. She definitely went there. She spoke about how she was in nightclubs at like the age of 13, okay, and how her parents were just super irresponsible, leaving her with their friends and people who would touch her inappropriately. She didn't really have a structured childhood, because I didn't know, at a certain point, by the age she was like 15, apparently the family had made some money and she asked to go to boarding school. So she went off to boarding school, and that was the last time she had a structured, well, not even really structured, but a parental guidance, some semblance of parental guidance. Because after that, you're in high school, you become 18 at that point, you're an adult, so you're off and doing your own thing, making a life for yourself. But she had her father and stepfather, both of whom were awful apparently, but one of the other of them had prostitutes watching her when she was super young. And she also revealed, what I thought was interesting, was that her mother's eating disorder was her mom's most precious relationship, even more so than she feels the relationship between mother and daughter, which should have been the most important. But instead it was this eating disorder, and she could never get in between her mom and this disorder. And she spoke about how it was hard for her to even stomach a meal with her. And then she started talking about how all the different things in our lives and events that are surrounded around food, right? Like you go to a party, or you go to, you just have a dinner. Like when you're around people you love, you're typically eating, drinking something. I mean, it's just a given. But then when your mom has an eating disorder, and every one of those events is some type of ordeal, because she has to go into a bathroom where she's going to throw up, and Bethenny's saying that the bathroom smells, and she can smell it. She can't take her over to a friend's house because she's going to throw up all over their bathroom, and then they're going to smell it, and then she's embarrassed, and it's a whole thing. And she dealt with that for years. And my heart just goes out to Bethenny with everything that she has been revealing, because she's gone through it. She's definitely gone through it. But ultimately, I do think Bethenny knows her mother loved her in her own way, because she brought up how, as her mom passed, she was wanting to find a good picture of her where she was beautiful, at her peak. And she was looking through some things, and she ended up finding these letters from her mother when she was in boarding school. So her mom was, sending letters to her, and she kind of was dumping on Bethenny with what was going on with her father and stepfather, and the money issues and all her ailments she had going on. But within those complaints, there would be moments where her mother would say to her and admit, I could see how you could feel at times that you were the mother and I was the child. You've done so much better than I could have imagined, and you've taken care of yourself pretty much. And that calling Bethenny the light of her life. And Bethenny kind of had a breakdown in that moment, because she's seeing these moments of where her mother is being very real and showing her love. And she's like, why did I not read these last month when I could have had a chance to, be by her side as she was passing? Why couldn't I have seen these earlier? Because she started feeling bad and realizing her mother did love her in her own way. But when you're 20-something years old and you're dealing with this and that, and you're hearing all these complaints and reading these letters, those things can get lost. So she felt like, oh my God, why did I disconnect from her? Started feeling guilty that she didn't have the relationship she wanted with her mom, and forgetting why she disconnected. So she started going to all these friends and stuff, trying to get validation that her mother was as awful as she's been saying, which is so interesting, because when someone passes, you want to hear the good things about them. But Bethenny didn't want that, because it would make her feel like she's a horrible daughter and feeling guilty that she wasn't there and that she didn't have this relationship with her mom. So I get it. I definitely get it, but it's something I hadn't really heard before, where she wanted to hear the bad things, and she needed to have her friends tell her, like, yes, this was real. You struggled. You went through some bullshit. Your mom was not the easiest person to deal with. She was mean. She had biting words, and, kind of validate those feelings that Bethenny had and why they were so disconnected, to kind of alleviate that guilt of Bethenny not being there. We are all very layered people, and our experiences and our life decisions all together culminated and make us up to be the person that we are today. And we are all sitting and living the life based off of our past decisions. And I think that Bethenny is realizing that about her mom. She's realizing that about herself. And she's coming to terms with, especially with Mother's Day around the corner, the mother that she's being to Bryn, and really delving into this childhood trauma that she didn't really want to deal with before, and possibly could have intervened or hampered relationships and connections that she's tried to have in the past. So I think that this is good, that she has just gotten all of this out of her. It really felt like by the end of it, she was like emotionally drained. You can see it in her face. It really took a lot out of her. But at the same time, I probably think that she felt relieved as well, and that she had some type of release. And she spoke about, with Mother's Day coming up, that we really need to, sometimes you can give yourself grace, you can give your mom grace, because I often forget, as a daughter, we've known our mothers our whole lives, but our moms, they've lived 20 some odd plus years, depending on when your mom had you, where we didn't know them, and they were living a life that we have no clue about. We could hear stories and this and another, but we weren't there experiencing it with them, and they have their trauma and their issues, which essentially equates to how they raise us. Or they were raised in a bad way and they try to do better, or, vice versa. It just is based off of the decisions we decide to make as parents. But she was just saying how she hopes that this video is helpful for other people who have had disconnected relationships or strained relationships with their mothers, and to get women to think about how they are as a mom, or women who, like me, are thinking about being a mom in the future, about the mom you want to be, and giving grace to your own parents. Like I said before in my, earlier in the video, there are some things that are inexcusable, I understand, but giving grace for some of the things that maybe your mother had went through that we didn't know about, because there's no handbook on being a parent. You kind of just have a kid and you figure it out as you go. But I really think that this was a very touching video that Bethenny did, and how she was so vulnerable. And I do think that there is a lot of people that can relate to her stories and her feelings about her mother, her mixed feelings, because on one hand, she did have a lot of trauma because of her mom and her decisions. But on the other hand, I feel like she knows that her mother loved her in her own way, and that's where that guilt is coming in, especially when she saw those letters. But I think that ultimately her allowing Bryn to have that relationship with her was the best thing, because she's not going to have that guilt on her. What if I wish I would have done this? I wish I would have done that. She did what she could on that front. And it was a lot. It was definitely a lot to digest and take in. So I definitely suggest you go over to Bethenny's channel and watch for yourself if you're interested. But it definitely gave me a different perspective and insight on Bethenny. We see her as a housewife. We see the quick wit. We see how she can be kind of very terse and biting, and with some of her words and some of the things she says and how she deals with the ladies. But it all makes sense. It all makes sense. But before I go, the thing that cut me up at the end was when she said that she's lived a lot of her life alone. And now she is really alone now because her mom is gone. Like, her parents are gone. And she doesn't have siblings, so she's alone. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like, that really kind of hit me hard because who wants to feel alone? But it does sound like Bethenny has friends, and I hope that, you know, her support system is lifting her up right now during this time, because she, in the previous video, we were talking about the divorce trauma she's gone through, and then, you know, the passing of her mother on top of that. It's a lot. And she said in the beginning that it almost feels debilitating to her. So I hope that she's just taking some time and getting some rest and continues to delve into her childhood trauma if she feels like it's going to ultimately release and help her be able to connect in her other relationships. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Ta-ta.